Has everybody joined the meeting?
Nope, not quite yet.
Okay. All right. Jolene's turning the mics on, so they're going to be hot. From here on in.
I like that one, thank you. I feel like there should be a roadie. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. I heard that this one, well, I just.
All right, oh, I think you're sensitive.
All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order. We're in open session, and we meet in accordance with open meeting laws. Roll call has been taken by computer. This meeting of the Ripon Area School District Board of Education has been properly noticed in accordance with the open meeting law and state statute 19.84 and related legal references. The vision of the Ripon Area School District is that we are one of Wisconsin's finest school districts, fostering excellence for all through innovation. We accomplish this vision through our core values of integrity, excellence, commitment, collaboration, innovation, and kindness. Do we have any written comments received? Okay. And visitors' comments?
No one has.
I don't believe we have any. So we will move. Does anybody feel the need to adjust the tonight's agenda? Okay, and hearing none, we'll move right to announcing donations to the school district.
Thank you. Mike and Irene Treater donated $500 to the Ripon High School Band. First Congregational Church donated close to $1,200 for unpaid school lunch accounts. Bruce Patrick donated over $1,000 for unrestricted donation to the Education Foundation, as well as Jean and Andy Like, $500 to the Ripon Education Foundation. Justin Krieger, an alumnus from the high school, donated $10,000, and that's to be used for 2 new scholarships that will be awarded beginning in May of 2020. And Ride for Awareness, Robert Weimer donated $2,400 to the Education Foundation, and that is to renew support for the Eichstead scholarships. So we're very thankful for those donations.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you to the donors. Next, we will hear a presentation from a proposed vendor of a nature-based playground playscapes at the Barlow Park building.
All right.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? All
Yes.
right. First off, just want to thank you all for inviting me here, for the team at Barlow for starting this conversation. My name is John LaPointe, and I'm the founder and owner of GRD Playscapes. I've been in business for 15 years and have been experimenting and developing innovative and creative techniques for inspiring children for all those years. Started out early days in business and had my own children and had to figure out first off how to inspire my own kids. And so it started in my backyard and kind of blossomed from there. A lot has gone on in these 15 years, and mainly it's been how to manage safety expectations, how to deal with the same safety standards that all playground companies need to follow. What sort of materials can you use to build a natural playground that's going to last a very long time? And then what sort of ideas actually work. in the outdoor setting for kids. And so it's, there's a lot to be said about all of that, and I certainly can answer questions moving forward. But I wanted to say that this design started with Nature Explore, and I've worked with Nature Explore before. We have a collaboration where their designs, they're laying out the foundation for these spaces, and then when we come in, our expertise is in construction and actually making these spaces come to life in the real world. And so what we did is we took the design that was put forward by Nature Explorer and laid out how exactly this would be built and could be built, and the products that we would use, that we've developed over the years to make the space come to life. There are a lot of really cool aspects to nature play that I think at least a couple that I can highlight. Mainly what we're trying to do when we're building these nature-rich play environments is, first off, just build a complete space for children to engage with. And it's so, whereas a conventional playground would typically, put a structure in the middle of a space, and you're kind of relegated to a scripted play environment where you're kind of going up or going down, climbing this, climbing that in a way that is very much detailed and designed by the designer. Whereas our spaces, we try to make them as open-ended as possible, really encouraging kids to make choices and to be as creative and engaged, both physically but also socially, and then emotionally have opportunities to kind of explore themselves. And so really that's the nature, or what we say that our ultimate goal is self-discovery, and that self-discovery comes through engaging in a creative way with your space. And I often say that teachers are wonderful at this, and they're especially in the younger years, they're designing very creative and throughout the years, but designing very creative spaces on the inside for their kids. And that it's often difficult to step outside or to know what to do outside. So that's kind of the void that we're filling, is helping schools and child care facilities and public spaces to build spaces that really work for kids in the outdoors. Is there any immediate questions that I can answer?
Who can speak to the process of identifying a need to replace to do this work?
You can stay there. I just come and join you then.
Sounds good.
So this has been a project over the last couple of years for both Barlow Park and Journey. We found a need to not only update the playground structures. The structures that were there actually came from the country schools when they combined to make Barlow Park. So those structures are from 1994. So there is a need to replace them. There was one large structure that we had removed because it was broken by the end of, was it last school year? 2018. And so we had removed that, and then we had been working with Kat Griffith to provide some other opportunities for kids to kind of experiment and see whether or not they liked the nature-based play or whether they wanted to go with the actual structure. And then we, after they had the time to experiment with those pieces of hay bales and straw and logs and boards, then we did have classroom teachers survey the kids to find out which they preferred. Most of them preferred the nature playground. Some of them preferred both. They liked having both options. So the plans as they are right now are for the space where the structure was already removed. The other structure will remain there until we decide how we want to and what we want to incorporate as we go further out. Although the kids do have some very big dreams of a zip line going from there. So, but what we found as the kids were playing in the nature playground area, what we found as a result of that, what we know is when our kids go on a field trip to South Woods, or they go on a field trip to the prairie, when they are outside, they are just more at peace with themselves. They're more regulated, and there are studies that do prove that green space and nature do provide a lot of positives for your mental health. So that was one very large piece of it that our teachers just had noticed going on field trips. With the experimentation of the additional pieces in there provided by Kat, what we found is that our kids are engaging in a deeper level of play than they were before. They're collaborating as far as moving things or stacking things. They're building, they're actually engaging with the pieces that are out there. It's not beautiful when you see it all just laying there, but when you see the kids engaging in the play out there, it becomes a whole different level of beauty that is almost indescribable. Initially, when our kids were doing imaginative play outside, you would often see them reenacting video games or movies. There was very little communication among them, and now they're inviting others to join in, and they have a storyline going in their head, and they're sharing on that, and they're working on it. They're building houses. They're chiseling ice chunks. They're engaging in just a much deeper level of play. And then additionally, we're providing an opportunity to have a little bit of safe risk out on the playground. And studies have shown that we don't provide our kids with enough risk right now, and then that ends up being a challenging thing for them once they get to those more challenging parts of their lives later on. And so, like I had mentioned before, that first day when there were hay bales and they had boards that were over the top of them, very similar to a teeter-totter, they were like, no, Mrs. Sanderfoot, you need to take those down, that's dangerous. And I said, well, it's only dangerous if you don't know how to use it. And so the high school kids had come over, they showed them how to have balance buddies, and it became, and now they've all figured it out very, very quickly. But our kids aren't really used to that kind of risk, again, the safe risk. So that's really how things had started. And then we brought Nature Explorer in because they did a 3-hour professional development in how to interact with nature in the classroom and how to offer just different ways of play that a conventional playground wouldn't necessarily provide.
I have to say that when we're done, it's going to be very beautiful. So, starting out, it's one of the concepts that's critical in nature play is loose parks. And so what the team in Barlow did so wonderfully is that they started with loose parks, and it's a very inexpensive way to get involved in nature play, but it's so true. I tell centers and schools and all the time that if you could do nothing else but provide loose parks, get some volunteers together, sand some tree branches and provide some planks of wood. If you allow kids the opportunity to reimagine their space and empower them with that, with the tools, that it's pretty magical. And I completely on the same page. When you see kids in that environment, the magic is real, and it's very profound.
Can we talk a little bit more about risk and the loose parts? Just being a mom, I know that when kids have a board or a large tree branch, they could have very innocent intentions, but they like to start swinging it around.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we address that on the playground?
Absolutely.
We still have our supervisors out there. We have 3 supervisors out there during recess, before school, and after school. One person is in the nature playground area to actually support the play, not necessarily to take the items away, but to redirect. I noticed that you're using it like this. Did you look at what was behind you? Did you look at what was in front of you? Here's a safer way to do that, or here's another way to think about that. Maybe you can use that instead of as a sword, maybe you can use it to build a house.
Bat. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But we do, we do have some of those risks already in the playground. We do have baseball bats and wiffle bats and things like that out there for them to play with. So it's still a lesson that they have to learn of how to look behind you, how to look around you, make sure that when you're swinging it that you're not taking someone out.
Is this proposal large enough to accommodate all the kids we have at Barlow School?
We will still have the additional structure there, along with the field and the swings and the blacktop. So it's a large enough start, but at some point we'll have to have plans for the rest.
So there's room for additional,
Mm-hmm.
okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So there's still room for that zip line, if that's what you were wondering about.
That's what I was wondering.
Well, I've played in the current nature playground, and it's fantastic. And the kids do, I mean, I've seen the scenarios that you've talked about, and the supervisors handled it quite well. My biggest concern is making sure that there's enough messy stuff here, because I mean, it's wonderful that it will be beautiful, but to me, it's more important that it's, you know, a fun, safe, or, you know, protected, unsafe
I can maybe
experience.
explain a couple of the additional
Sure.
features that.
What I do love about the design is that it's not just the messy stuff. We have some kids that would really love to sit down and do some smaller building with smaller pieces, and that's incorporated in there. There's a section for art and music. That's not, we don't have that yet outside, but we have some kids that would love to have that available. And why don't you go ahead and explain more of that?
You know, so we also have a gross motor skill climbing structure that's a part of this. Actually, two products that I think are going to be very well received by the kids. One is a climbing wall and a set of rings that is attached. So going up against the building, there would be a wall with pegs. So it's kind of designed for moving crossways. And then right behind you, there's some hand rings, so the kids can grab the rings and kind of swing themselves, which is upper body strength, which is a big need for, you know, all children to develop. In addition to that climbing wall and the rings, there's what we call a climbing tree structure, which is essentially a series of logs that are connected together at various heights with some stumps, which allows the kids to kind of go on a never-ending open adventure, you know, where they can approach these logs in different ways every time. And so those two features are the big kind of gross motor skill features in the playground. In addition to that, there's a water feature. The feature will have a hand pump, so the kids can pump out the water, watch the water go through a stream, you know, explore steam in its various capacities, which will undoubtedly be a centerpiece for the school. There's a ADA path with a bridge, so children with disabilities can ride along the path and ride up onto an accessible deck. And if the funds are there, there'll be musical instrument panel there for the kids to enjoy. So there's a lot of various features. So again, it's really about activating the entire space. So it's amazing, you know, the stories you hear about how many kids can use these spaces compared to a conventional play environment, just because the natural spreading out of the kids is so much more.
It sounds great. Does anybody else have any comments or questions?
Yeah, I just have one last question. Looking over your list of past clients, it seems that your clientele is in much more of an urban environment. Would this particular project provide some unique challenges and opportunities being in a more rural setting?
Sure. Well, I see the need for this sort of play and socialization and levels of engagement everywhere. You know, so we're facilitating a high level of play, and play is something that, you know, crosses boundaries. You know, and so that's really the core of when I imagine your children, you know, the Barlow children, the Ripon children, in that space out there, and I see the level of engagement, the level of activity, I know that it's going to have a big impact on their lives, and that's you know, urban or rural, it's the same.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One last question, is there much of an additional burden on the physical plant, on the staff in maintaining the space? Is it,
We would do our monthly checks just like we do with the other structures, and you know, if it's depending on the usage, I mean, that would dictate how often we check it. You know, but it is natural stuff, so I mean, it would just be the same as what a structure would be, that we would, if something's starting to see end of life or starting to fail, we would look at replacing. And
is there sand, like by the water pump?
Yes, there is. So that's, you know, annual replenishment will undoubtedly be necessary of some sort. And, you know, there will be, you know, there are trees and shrubs and part of this design. You know, this is a living landscape. You know, we're protecting the plants with the design, but, you know, the kids will need to learn how to respect the plants and, you know, replacements, that does happen. The need for that happens.
Is there a concern with it being in the state of Wisconsin where we have a majority of the time where the kids are in school, we have winter? So we've got the sand area and the water area. Does it become unusable for the kids in winter? Or is there something that is replaceable or something that is still usable for them
Sure.
in the cold months?
Yeah, I mean, usage is going to, of the different concepts, different ideas will vary dramatically. You know, you're not going to, you know, most of the sand will be frozen. And the water feature, you know, the pump will be deactivated during the, you know, those frozen months. But you know, there's still a lot of the core features, the hill, the path, the deck and the musical instruments and the climbing, and all the loose parts are still fully functional. But certainly it's regrettable that they won't be used 12 months out of the year. And if you have
then
summer
sometimes
school,
we'll add snow to it so that it'll get colder than
yeah,
Just kind of a little bit about the wood that's used.
sure. Yeah, so just to give you a sense for the materials we use and why we use them. So we use the black locust wood, which is actually an invasive species in Wisconsin. So many landowners wish to get rid of it, including the state of Wisconsin. So this wood is actually the most rot-resistant wood north of Ipe. It's North America's version of Ipe. It's known to last 40 plus years in the ground. And so what we do is we harvest it, we age it for usually over 12 months. We take off the bark, we're sanding it, we're cutting it to its pieces, and building all of our structures out of this. So we're adding an option for sculpting these environments using material that is not it's not readily available at this point, and we're trying to change that.
Well, if there are no more questions, I'd like to thank you for that great presentation, and we can move on. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Do we expect that to be in the February, international item in February?
Yeah, I'd love to have questions on for Dawn regarding that.
I have one question. So
Sure.
is this an all or nothing plan? Like this is presented as it is? Like you're saying the water and stuff like that, like I didn't even think about that. So what if we chose other, well, I'm just saying, if you have other like musical instruments or other
Sure.
things, I'm sure you have a variation of things that you can put into the playground.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if, given what you were just saying, with some of the water features or other features, if there are other more three-season friendly features, that we could put in there instead of the two-season ones. I'm just,
And I think it's possible. I know that through the process that Tanya went through, working with the designers that came in, working with her staff to select the features.
So water feature and the sand was the #1 requested thing by staff.
okay.
And then the stage or the deck was the #1 thing requested by kids.
Yeah, and I can see that one being year-round kind of thing. The planter one I found to be interesting just because they do that already. We have planter boxes along the fences that the kids already use. So I wasn't sure if that one was something, that another since we already have it, if we could do a different one than that.
And some of the items on the list are a la carte, so I mean, you see a bottom number
Right.
where it would be site work and then the initial big structures, and then it's the loose parts and the art stuff could be added.
Sure.
But we look for what's our best bang for our buck that makes it functional and gives us somewhat of a finished product. Because you can always add more loose pieces as you go. But we wanted to look, you know, what can we give that the kids are gonna gravitate to right away. You know, and that was some of the stuff that Tanya's team found out, you know, going through the process of the summer trainings and stuff with Nature Explorer. You know, these are the things that the kids really want. You know, so some of those big ticket items, like the water table, was like, that's like one of our number one things, you know, and, you know, we can get, you know, something down the road, or we can look for, you know, somebody to donate, you know, to that, to add something, you know, but we really wanted to get the structures so we no longer have to disturb the area once the structures are in.
So when we wrote it, the plan as is.
As is,
I'm just gonna add another thing, so that the planning beds are not actually part of the current plan, that's an a la carte item that we'd have to add. And the music and stuff, we're looking at different ways we can do it from the Butler Park Charter grant, so that we think we can add on some of these things that aren't in phase one of the project.
Okay.
But the other thing I just wanted to mention is that we've all talked about if you guys would be interested in doing tours of different playgrounds and so that we could kind of just look at it together and see different features of the playgrounds that we might like, if there was anything that we thought we needed to add, or if we saw something in our current design that we didn't think would be as useful or something, we could maybe take tours with you guys if you want to come with us to do that. So.
Do we get to play?
For your mom.
I think that's a good opportunity for us.
And we would run the same idea
When
as
would you
when
look to do that,
we looked at turf.
Soon, I don't know, we'd
have to do it soon.
We have
Probably
to,
the next week or so, week or two. We can get some dates out to you guys and some proposed sites from the vendor. And then, you know, if you guys we wanna go together as one, or if you wanna go individually, we'll get you all the necessary information. Because we learned from the turf, you know, that if we really see it up in person, it really makes a little more sense than looking at it on a piece of paper.
Sure.
And Tanya, I would recommend to even have one or two of your staff members attend so that they could help to explain the staff development process they went through as they learned about the different elements and the kind of play that it inspires, or why that feature may be in, that we may not know just from looking at the surface.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Well, next, we'll hear from the student representative from Ripon High School, Mr. Theo Rausch.
All right, so unfortunately, just because of these past few weeks being so crazy with the college finals and Christmas break and then the high school finals week, we really haven't been able to make any time to squeeze in an extra meeting for any of the other subcommittees. So there isn't any progress on dress code or cell phone policy, but we were able to have a full student council meeting, and right now we're in the midst of planning for Winterfest, which is just our wintertime dance. And this year we're thinking about incorporating a spirit week beforehand, so we'd have different dress-up days like snow day, which would be like a PJ dress-up day, and then sweater weather would be the ugly sweater, and just things like that. And then have different fun activities for the students to engage in, like an elf on the shelf sort of scavenger hunt, and then maybe even an assembly with different activities and whatnot. So that's what we're doing now.
Break up the monotony of winter.
Exactly, yeah. Especially second semester, it starts to become a bit of a haul, not being able to go outside or enjoy the summer like that. So anything to make it more enjoyable for the students.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Theo? Okay, thanks very much. And you can stay or go. It's up to you.
I'm sorry, I gotta get jump started on my classes.
I hear you. Yes. Okay, moving on. We will get to, I'll accept a motion for approving the consent agenda.
So move.
Thank you, Andy and Nicole. And call for the vote. Oh dear, okay, and we've all consented to the consent agenda. Unanimously. Okay, next is our first action item, the new course pathways for high school science. We heard an extensive presentation about this last month, but are there any, well, I guess I will, would like somebody to make a motion and then we can have any discussion. Thanks, Nicole. Thank you, Betsy. Okay, are there any questions for Chrissy or Mary? Okay, yeah, I think
Good discussion last
we had a very good discussion last month, and so I will call for the vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, next item is adoption of materials for AP Social Studies. I guess I'll accept the motion and then Chrissy, maybe you could answer any questions that the board might have.
So moved.
Thank you, Nate.
Second.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, are there any questions for Curriculum Director Chrissy Dom? Okay, I think it was well presented. Call for the vote. And that passes unanimously. Our next action item is to approve our open enrollment seats for 2020-2021. Again, I'll accept the motion, and then if we have questions for Jonah or Mary, we can ask them.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Tom.
I'll second.
Thank you, Nate.
And as with last year, this is that same process where we didn't limit the number of seats that were available in grade levels based on the programs that we have. And we did change up the document that you received in the past. We had gone through and looked at numbers of sections and numbers of students and always ensured that we had at least 4 seats open at every grade level. And we took a little bit different approach in terms of just showing you the history of open enrollment, the number of students coming in, the number of students going out, the total student gain, and then that net gain in terms of dollars. And then one of the things that had come up last year was what percentage of our students do we lose to open enrollment. And so you can see that on the far right-hand side where we're at in terms of that percentage, our high being 7%, and we're at 6% right now. Which did spur on conversation about the fact that it was about 6 years ago that we did our last open enrollment survey and thought it was probably time to do that survey again and check in with our families, especially those that are leaving the district to head to other schools, to find out if there's a service that we could provide here that would allow us to retain them. In some cases, there isn't anything that we can do. They have a preference. They might live right on the district border with a neighboring school that they may have attended. Or they may take their child to another city with them for childcare purposes because that's where they work. And sometimes if they attend another district for childcare and they get to know that group of friends, they continue on. So again, just those things that we want to be aware of and see if there's anything that we can do to change that percentage. It would be nice to get it down under 5%. And then you can see our total net gain for open enrollment. And we are just under 900,000. Be nice to get that over a million. I think we'll probably do that next year.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
It's great to see the big gain. Do we know what the typical percentage of outgoing students is around the state?
You know, I don't. It really does vary though by school districts. There are, I know, any number of school districts that truly lose to open enrollment. And they have kind of an exodus of students out. And there are school districts where, you know, just at our last PAC meeting, there's a school district that was saying over 50, they're a very small school district, but over 50% of their student population is students that open enroll in. And I know that that's true in the case of Green Lake, a smaller school district where there's a high number of open enrolled in, so that percentage is really skewed. But I can look to see if we could, that data's got to be some.
Well, the only thing I was going to say, the average, I think, would be, it's a zero-sum game, so every kid that comes in is another kid that's out, and I think, you know, for every district that has gains, there's a district that has losses. And so, you know, the average would be, you know, 0, but if you had the whole state, I think, so, but we're doing awesome to be in, you know, to have the gains that we have, to have as many in open enrolled in that we have.
Sure, it'd be zero sum if you're not including the online schools too?
Well, do you mean the schools that have online only? Is that what you're?
Well, I wonder if that would skew the figures.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. If you have the online school, you're gonna have more open enrolled in.
Yeah.
And you were wondering for that, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions? If not, we'll call for the vote. And our open enrollment numbers have been approved unanimously. Okay, next up is a proposal to approve. I just wanted to make sure this is one temporary aid, or is it
This is the one I referred to
positions?
in December, that I was ideally going to have on in December and didn't have the agenda, so we did talk about this at our last meeting. And there was a position that you approved earlier in the year, and the person that was in that position moved into a long-term teaching position, so that position sunsetted because of the number of days. So this is a position that basically would be creating that one extra person, like we had at the beginning of the year. As that one went away, this would be an extra set of hands in the school for the remainder of the school year. So the other position that you approved has finished up because it was a total of 70 days.
Okay,
Make a motion to approve.
thank you, Nicole.
Second.
Amy, thank you. Okay, are there other questions or comments with regard to this request? Hearing none, let's call for the vote. Temporary aid position for Murray Park Quest is approved unanimously. Okay, next, we have a proposal to add additional hours to the principal at Odyssey Academy of Virtual Learning, as well as another partial position for a teacher.
Correct, for elementary. And I think the attached memo gives you just an idea of where we're at with our student-teacher ratio, which is wonderful to see. But we also know that we're moving into a very busy time where we're looking at open enrollment, making a lot of contacts with families. And one of the things that we know from the online school and our kind of our onboarding process, that really families begin to start looking at curriculum materials for the following year as early as April. And so we want to make sure that we get those teacher-student ratios to a reasonable point, so that as they go into that point of the year where they're not only teaching but also planning very extensively with families for the start of the next school year, that we have that staffing in place.
Okay, let's have a motion and then we can discuss further if necessary.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Nicole.
A second.
Thank you, Andy. Any questions or comments about this proposal? Okay, thank you. I think it makes a lot of sense. Call for the vote. And that the additional elements are approved for Odyssey. Okay, now we have some possible upcoming action items with regard to policies. I'm trying to think of.
Yeah, I was going to say, and some administrative guidelines, and it was pretty relatively straightforward policy committee meeting. We've been known to go upwards of 3 hours, and I think we had a record. It was less than 40 minutes, I think, to go through them.
The vast majority of the changes were in wording, replacing district administrator with superintendent, that kind of thing. I cannot think of anything controversial in our review.
And you'll see that as you go through and just look at the language changes.
So,
but they are on for this month and then 2 more months, a total of 3 months.
it would be a good idea to, if you didn't attend those great policy committee meetings, just peruse through, and if you have any questions for Mary, ask them before we, there's probably, what, 3 readings, I believe, so we have time. And so I'm going to skip through the remaining policy upcoming actions. Okay, next we have summer school dates to be approved. Will we be approving those next month? Okay.
And it's pretty straightforward. We always set those out. So.
Nothing looked unusual to me, but unless other people are more sensitive to calendar type issues, anybody see any red flags or anything?
It's nice that the 4th of July lands on the weekend, and so we have a nice long weekend. It's always hard when it lands on a Wednesday in the middle of the week. We tend to lose students for much more of that week. So.
Is 24 days the normal number of days of instruction?
Yep, we have had some years where it's 23. It's just the way that the calendar falls. So.
Okay, and you're not ready to talk about numbers and like staffing and that kind of thing?
That'll be coming.
Okay.
Yes, it's just begun.
Okay.
One of the things that we did note with the new format that we've been sharing with the board for the calendar, we've actually been including, this past year we included the summer school right on the calendar. So you've actually already approved next year's summer school as you approve next year's calendar, and we'll continue to do that and just streamline the process. So this is the last time you'll see summer school separate from the overall calendar.
Great.
Efficiency.
Any other comments about summer school this time, calendar? Okay. That's not it clicked. Let's see. Okay, we'll go now to superintendent reports.
First legislative breakfast was held this past Friday and was well attended. Gary was there and participated. A lot of conversation about mental health and the resources that are needed in schools, how schools are using their mental health grant funds if they have those, and just overall conversation about the shortage of mental health care providers for families or anyone across the state. So certainly an area where there's room for those who are interested in going into that field. So it was a good session though, and those will continue each month. So if you have interest in attending, just let Jolene or I know. The next item under superintendent reports is operational referendum timeline, so that you can have a general idea of what we're headed into. And it's very similar to what our timeline looks like for our facilities and operational referendum that we had 6 years ago. Most importantly, over the next couple of months, we'll host 4 engagement sessions to really hear from the community and find out if they have interest in moving forward with operational referendum similar to it was, including some of those same items, which were very heavy with the curriculum and instructional materials as well as technology and some maintenance. And then those larger questions that we talked about, is there anything in terms of our green space, Eagles Field, future track project, or doing any kind of endowment for the replacement of those fields. So we'll have 4 different sessions for community members, for parents or staff to engage in and be a part of that conversation to help give the board an idea of direction to head. And the outcome of those engagement sessions will be a community survey so that we can take those ideas from that group, which will hopefully represent the larger community, and then have that survey go out so you can have a good idea of what the larger voters are thinking. The survey results would come back in May and would give the board a couple of months to develop a referendum question, and that does need to be voted on in August so that it would be ready for the ballot in November. So just a nice timeline laid out with what that kind of communication and engagement process would look like as we move forward to November. So if there's any questions on that. Certainly can change to some degree once we get in those engagement sessions. Our community might tell us they want things added or adjusted in that time. You know, our goal with our last referendum was just openness and transparency. So really engaging the community and having everyone feel like, I think last time somebody made the comment, if you didn't know anything about the referendum, you literally had to have your head stuck in the sand. And if we can accomplish that same feeling, where everyone's aware of what's going on, whether they support it or don't, they're well informed about what it is and what's involved, that would be our ultimate goal. So.
Timeline looks doable to me,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm happy that you've laid the groundwork for getting this done.
So you see the dates, and I know Jolene is looking to send out invites to, at least personal invites at least to the group of individuals that tends to participate in the community engagement sessions and the strategic planning each spring. So we'll start with that group and then send out invites, press releases in the paper, invites to our staff. We'll use our IC Messenger to engage parents and hopefully have a good turnout. So, but if there's anyone that you think would be important to have in that conversation, please feel free to reach out and extend an invitation, or let Jolene or I know so we can add them to our email list as well.
Will the engagement sessions be approximately the same for each one, or do they build on each other?
They do build. They do build as we move forward to that survey.
Okay.
And I think they're roughly about an hour is what we found out that works pretty well. The nice thing is we're not competing with beautiful spring weather like we do for our spring strategic planning. So hopefully, if we have coffee and some treats, it might be even more inviting for individuals to join us.
The first one is on a Monday, I believe. Is that correct? And then the other 2 are on Tuesdays. Is that by design?
I think there's some other Mondays, and then one is a Thursday, I think.
Oh, there's 4. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the majority of them are Mondays, with one being a Thursday.
Thursday, I think so. These
They're all
totally
from
wrong.
6 to 7:30 here in this high school community room. The first one is February 3rd, then February 12th, March 2nd, and March 3rd.
And then that third one is in room 1101?
Correct, and that's because Hunter Safety is in here.
Oh, okay.
1101 is Kelly Essel's room,
And that's just down the hall.
so easy access.
Any questions, thoughts about the schedule and the timeline? Great, thank you. Next is just something that I thought would be interesting to discuss. I think Ripon is relatively, I mean, it's not extremely unique, but for a small school district, we have a board of 9 members. And this election cycle, of course, it's different from each cycle, but this cycle, we have an open seat where nobody filed papers in time to run. And it just brought up the question, to me anyway, as to whether or not it might be useful to think about reducing the number of our board members to the most common number of board members in Wisconsin school districts, which is 7. Some thoughts I had is that we are a small community. We have a limited number of people in a kind of the leadership pool, people who are willing to take leadership positions in community organizations. And if we're pulling 9 people, we're asking 9 people to make a fairly substantial commitment of their time for 3 years. Those are people that are less available for service in other community organizations. And the fact that we have an open seat this time around. So I thought we would throw that out for discussion. Maybe it's not worth discussing at all. But I'm interested in hearing what the board has to say. Tom?
Who can make the decision, the board or the annual meeting?
It's at the annual meeting.
Okay.
It has to be at the annual meeting, and based on statute, there would need to be 100 signatures collected. I'm not sure that 100 people have to show up, right?
Correct, it's the signatures.
100 signatures. It is interesting to me that Marquezan has an 11-member board, and I didn't think 11 was allowed, which would seem almost unmanageable.
Well, my understanding of Marquezan too is that they're a larger school district, and the way that they have it set up is that individuals represent certain townships, so that's part of why you have that high number.
Right. Oh, I see. So we're all at large. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, so it would have to be done at the annual meeting. And we wouldn't be able to reduce our size immediately from 9 to 7, if I'm understanding
It occurs at
it.
the next election.
So every year we could reduce it by 1.
Or you could go maybe the next year by 2. It has to be at the election.
At the annual meeting,
You vote at the annual meeting and then the reduction occurs at the next
the
election.
following time. So if we were to decide to do this, it's kind of a 2-year, maybe 3-year process.
It's nothing that would happen quickly.
So we have to get 100 signatures from members of the public
Mm-hmm.
to bring to our annual meeting?
Yes.
The petition.
Tom, maybe you can answer this question best. Have we had instances like this in the past where we have had years where we've had an open seat and nobody has filed the paperwork to run?
In my 36 years, it's never happened.
Okay. My concern is that I was a little surprised initially when we did get the news that we had an open seat and nobody had filed to run for it. And I do think it's appropriate for us to have a conversation about this possibility, yet at the same time, I don't want it to be a reactionary thing, to be oh, this happened, so let's all of a sudden have this conversation going from 9 to 7. I think it deserves some more time and some more conversation.
I can vouch that during my initial run, I don't know, 3 years ago now maybe, so, that was a topic of conversation publicly. It wasn't necessarily a conversation on the board. I wasn't part of the board at that time. But I do know that during the debate time and things like that, that was a conversation as to why there were so many given the size of our community. So it's certainly not new that people would be talking about it. It just might be new to us that we're in a situation where the possibility is presenting itself, and it might be in our best interest to move toward that opportunity. That's all.
I'm a little uncomfortable with the board deciding how many people should be representing the community. That may be what the statute calls for, but I would like us to put something in place where the community advises us first about what they want.
At the annual meeting, it's anyone that comes to the annual meeting votes. It's not just the board. So that would be an opportunity for the community to come and actually participate in that vote.
Realistically speaking, and I've only got
we don't
one
have,
meeting under my belt, the community was not present. The board was present, but the community, we had very, low participation.
That's not to say that they're not aware that the meeting is there,
Right.
and it's always there, and that the opportunity.
I think it probably depends on what the topic of conversation is.
Yeah.
When it's been land sales and those kind of
Yeah.
things, or purchases, there have been times where it's been.
And I do want to say that I do think the public is speaking if at this juncture no one from the public thought it to be in their best interest to step forward and run. I mean, that does say something, that nobody ran for the position.
Well, and then again, too, if you look at last year's election, there were 2 individuals who had stepped forward before the filing deadline, and there was a open seat, or there was the question of, oh, will David Scott run again or not? And then when it became apparent he didn't and the deadline was extended, then 2 individuals, myself included, stepped forward. So I think sometimes when people know that there is that opportunity, they will step forward, but for whatever reason this year we didn't have that.
But the opportunity is there every year. I mean, we all are in cycles. So at any point in time in the next year, 2, 3, someone feels like they want to run, there would still be 7 seats to run for. It would never be that the opportunity no longer exists.
Do you think it's a worthwhile topic to maybe have 1 or 2 listening sessions or engagement sessions on? Do you think it would be a good idea to do it before the election? The election is in April, right? Or would it be better, it'd be interesting.
I don't think it's going to matter at that point because the process is going to take so long to complete. I don't know if you have to force it to get it in for April, it's going to get you.
Is this something that we want to task the administration with organizing for us?
I think it's a worthwhile topic. Sure.
At the very least, I would like a survey. Engagement sessions would be great. But I think we do need to hear from the community members.
I don't disagree. Yeah, I think I'd love to get community input.
Yeah, and in a meaningful way where we're hearing from as many people as we possibly can, even if that means we have to proactively go out and reach out to them.
And I think we should wait until after the election. We have no idea at this point in time how things are going to turn out with this new situation. So I think it's best to wait and then see where the cards fall and go from there.
What does that mean? We don't know how it looks like.
It's not going to affect the election either way.
Yeah.
Nothing could happen to the annual meeting, which will happen in the fall. So.
Oh, the annual meeting is in September?
So this election cycle will play out.
Well, and what I meant by that, Nicole, is that right now we have 2 individuals running for 3 seats, so the third person who will get elected will be elected by write-in, and nobody has stepped forward to say that they would wage a write-in candidacy, so it literally could be anybody.
Do we know that?
Yes. I was just going to say, nobody that we know of.
They have to submit papers to run as the write-in candidate, though. You still have to file papers with.
Yeah. It just can be written on a ballot when
What's
the
that?
election.
Yeah, Joni, Jolene, you've
Yeah,
done some
could you-
research on this,
could
maybe
you,
explain the
enlighten
process.
the board?
I have done some research, and I've learned a lot about the process. So we're in a bit of a unique situation. If we had 3 people who had filed paperwork for a position, and we have write-in candidates, if somebody is a registered write-in candidate at that point, then when the Board of Canvas assesses the votes, they would only count write-in candidates, okay? But
Who have registered?
Who have registered?
who have registered, correct. So the Mickey Mouses and Donald Ducks would not be counted, but if somebody did register as a write-in candidate, then they would be counted. However, the situation that we are in is that we have 2 filed candidates for 3 seats. And because there is 1 seat that is really open because nobody has filed for it, we have to count all write-in candidates. Now, so that means that they could be a registered write-in candidate or a non-registered write-in candidate. The difference is that if someone is a registered write-in candidate, then of course that information is made public ahead of time. The newspaper would probably report on that because I could confirm that they are a registered write-in candidate, and the likelihood then of those candidates having more votes, I think, would be higher. You know, it seems more logical that there would be more votes for somebody who had taken the time and showed a seriousness in their desire by registering. They also might be invited to forums, debates, that type of thing. So we're in a little bit of a unique situation because we have 1 seat that is, no one has claimed a desire to fill. Does that make sense? So I got that information through the Wisconsin Board of Elections. And the county clerk, or Fond du Lac County clerk, confirmed that with me with another conversation.
And just to clarify, Jolene, so if we don't have any registered write-ins, and you count every vote, you could have 10 neighbors that decide it's a great idea to all put their votes towards this one individual, and somebody could win with 10 votes and become one of our next school board members.
Correct. You do not have to be a registered write-in in order for your name to be counted in this election, because we have that extra seat.
Would the would the winner of that 3rd seat get a 1-year term or 3?
It would be a 3.
A 3.
Because it's, a seat is a seat. It's a 3-year seat.
So I understand this correctly. So I could go to the ballot box, write my wife down, unregistered,
Correct.
and she could win if she was the only one written in,
Yes.
even though she has no desire to serve on the
Well,
board.
she could decline. She could decline.
She would have to decline
She
at
could
that point.
decline.
Right.
That seems flawed somehow.
And to jump off that, John, I think that does bring up adequate concern. And again, going to Gary's point of broaching this topic, it presents the need for us to continue having this conversation.
Yeah, I would expect that given the rules, I would expect that someone will occupy that 3rd seat. But I suppose if nobody did occupy it, we would then have I don't know if it's an option or an obligation to fill the open seat. And you do that and that's done by application to the board. But I guess that would be, don't know if that scenario would happen, but.
Or, here's another question. All these questions. Could we, if interested, just keep the 8 seats and expedite that process of getting the 7? Could that be a possibility?
The only thing is that it has to be done in an annual meeting, And the annual meeting may not be held before May 15th or after October 31st. So you have a window of time for the annual meeting.
Okay.
Oh, so we could change the annual meeting.
But you couldn't change it to before the election.
But you could do it in May instead of when we've
If you didn't
traditionally
have
done.
someone fill the seat.
So then you would have a vacancy for perhaps a month, and with a vote, then we could go from 9 to 8, and then eventually to 7.
We align the annual meeting though to other important
Mhm.
board work, such as budget development, those kind of things, which likely wouldn't be ready.
Yeah,
Given
Jonah,
our schedule.
Jonah
Jonah,
probably doesn't want to move the budget process up by 4 months.
Jolene, is there a deadline for official candidate to file write-in paperwork?
It's the Friday before the election is their deadline for a write-in candidate to register. And in order to be a registered write-in candidate, all you have to complete is a campaign registration statement filed with me at the district office.
Which, that's the statement that we all do, right?
It is. The only difference is that you don't file the declaration for candidacy form along with that. So that's the document to verify. And then at that point, what I do is I would contact the county clerks to inform them that I have a registered write-in candidate, so that they would have that person's name and know that they are a valid registered write-in candidate.
And perhaps you can answer this too, Joel. With registered write-in candidates, if you show up at the polls, you have to request from the poll worker who are the registered write-in candidates so that you know it won't already be on the ballot.
Correct. But if someone were to ask, who are the registered write-in candidates, the poll workers could give them that information.
Are those names displayed anywhere? at the
My
polls?
understanding is, the way it works is you ask your poll workers, and they would give you their names.
Hmm.
You have to ask. I would hope that, maybe our resources in our community would help to share that information with voters ahead of time.
Well, do you folks want to continue to discuss this at our next meeting, or would anybody care to? Should we start organizing a session, or what are your thoughts? Do you want to wait on this? My sense is to sort of wait to see how things happen, but I did want to put it out there for the public to maybe get some feedback on. I'd be interested to know what people think. Can anybody think of a reason why a disadvantage to lowering our numbers from 9 to 7?
Well, the only thing that I can think of is just perhaps some of the initial confusion that could cause, because here we've been so used to every single year always voting for 3 school board members, and to then be in a cycle where one year you're voting for 3, then 2, then back to 3, that could perhaps cause some confusion initially, yet at the end of the day, I believe most voters, when they show up, they have an idea of who they want, they're fairly educated, and if not, it's right there on the ballot of who's up for election. But that's just one possibility.
Fewer board members could be interpreted as less representation for the community members, but that's up to the community members to decide.
Yeah.
Do we know why they originally chose 9, since it's only 13% of school boards in the state of Wisconsin have 9 members? Do we know why they set it up this way to start?
I'm thinking someone maybe just really liked that consistency.
I mean, it's nice to replace everyone on a regular basis, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3.
And I wonder if they had problems getting people to come to meetings, so you would have enough members to get a quorum to be able to vote on things. That would be the only other disadvantage I could think of. These times where you need enough to have a quorum.
Your quorum is lower than 2.
Because you just have to have one over the 50% for a quorum, so we would only need.
There are some things we really fight out too,
But it's still less than.
yes, it's all relative.
I'm in favor of 7 also, but I think one of the advantages of 9 is you have greater diversity of thought.
Yeah.
If you have a 7-person board or a 5-person board, 1 or 2 people can really make more of a difference than you could if you have 9. I think we've seen a little bit of that over the years.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Okay, well, my sense is I'm not feeling any sense of urgency to take action, but I appreciate your feedback, and if the paper were to report on this conversation, I'd be interested in hearing seeing what the
Forward the
community.
emails on over to Gary.
Cue the Facebook comments.
Get your copies ready, it's gonna be a show.
All right, so, okay, I had to wake up my computer here. I think we can cruise control.
Sounds like apparently I could write in my neighbor, I could write in whoever.
All right, next are the school highlights. I really enjoyed reading all of the highlights this month. Are there any questions for our principals?
I like the pictures too. They're fun.
Pictures are fantastic. What did I do? Okay. So hearing none, that brings us to curriculum highlights for January. And we have a very good summary of highlights that Chrissy provided. Are there any questions, or Chrissy, is there anything in particular that you need to point out to us at this time?
There's only one. There was an item on here on the highlights, number 6, which was the social emotional learning screener recommendation. I did end up pulling that for this month just because after attending our AMP, Allies and Mental Health Education meeting, we received some more information about some possible screeners that I actually will be bringing to the board in February, along with an update on our character strong pilots. So that'll be a double recommendation coming to you. So.
Okay, very good. We'll look forward to that.
Just comment too, my wife's a pediatrician in town, and she's seeing more and more need for this type of screening. There's less and less resources out there too. Someone who's been in the community for a while is leaving, I think Mead has left already. And it's falling to the pediatricians who don't have the training to handle the more severe cases. So it's a real crisis for us and our students.
I will say that at our legislative breakfast, it was a unanimous issue. All of the principals, all of the superintendents at my breakout table were talking about mental health needs in our districts. And
It's not unique to Ripon.
right. And many of them are doing, I think we're ahead of many districts, and other districts are doing the same kinds of things, taking the same kinds of approaches that we are. And I don't think our legislators, know about it. This was a good opportunity to educate them on the stuff that we're doing. Okay, next is an information item about an interim budget report. Jonah, is there anything unusual about the numbers in the interim budget?
No, nothing unusual this year. At this time compared to last year, we have a higher net loss, but the reason for that is just the timing of our revenue. We're going to have more local taxpayer revenue and more open enrollment revenue, which all are happening in the second half of the year compared to last year. So there's nothing that's surprising me at this point, so, no.
Thank you. Food service, Jonah, anything, to me, things are looking normal, but is there anything?
The only thing maybe to mention is the local revenue's down, but part of that is we are not having parents prepay for milk in elementary schools. They're paying for their milk and lunches all in one account and their breakfast all in one account now. It's just simpler for them, and then they only are charged for milk that they're actually taking instead of prepaying for the entire semester's worth. So there may be, because of that, that there may be less local revenue just because of the policy change. But we think it was a positive change so that parents aren't being charged for milk that their kids aren't actually drinking. So.
Thank you. Okay, we are done with the open session, and we are ready to convene to closed
I'll make a
session.
motion.
I'll
Thank
second.
you. Yep, I'll call for the vote, and then if you can turn off the mics. I keep calling for the vote, but nothing.
Nate, turn the whole side of the room over.
Well, when we separate the two of us.
Does anybody have their voting show up?
It's all you.
I don't have the button.
Join me again.
Oh,
If the computer goes to sleep, it takes you off.
Oh, sure. Fantastic. Okay, I think we're
Did you get Tom's bullets?
Nope.
Look at what's happening.
Nobody's keeping me honest.
Keep sitting there.
I think we're adjourned.
Right in line.
Thank you.